Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this episode of Group Thinkers. On today's show, Ronnie and I are thrilled to welcome John Perrell, the Director of Strategy and Member Experience for the Smithsonian Institution. John, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing very well, doing good. Have a little touch of the fall entering into Dallas as we're recording today, which is a break from our mid and upper 90s. So it feels great outside. We're thrilled to be talking to you. By the way, you are our first guest from an institution. So,
Cool.
there's that. No, we've had a handful. We've had lots of folks on the show over the 6 seasons that we've done this, and in each and every conversation, really what we try to drive to is understanding how nonprofit marketers, whether or not you're on the nonprofit side or on some sort of partner side or vendor side or whatever, how they might be thinking about or doing things differently. And I'm very excited for our conversation. One, because I know some of the answers, but then second, because I'm fascinated with the scope of your gig and the way in which you enable the mission of the Smithsonian across the board. And so I'm just really excited to chat today, and just couldn't be more appreciative of you making the time.
Great. Excited to be here.
Well, thanks. So really, just at the outset, the place that we like to start is you, and really understand your journey and how you ended up at the Smithsonian. So tell us a little bit about your background and that path into the nonprofit space, and how you ended up in your current stop.
I've been doing this a little over 22 years now, kind of in the nonprofit fundraising world. I started in the industry because I moved down to Washington, D.C., and my previous career, there was nothing for me in D.C. And I took my project management skills and started doing direct mail production management at an agency. Realized quickly that the thing I least like about our industry is producing direct mail. And I was much more interested in the strategy and the segmentation and the messaging that the agency clients were talking about with the nonprofits. And so after about 3 years, I jumped over to the American Red Cross National Headquarters. Started out with a mid-level chapter program. And worked my way over 8 years through a tsunami and Katrina, doing disaster fundraising and chapter fundraising to running the entire direct marketing program for national headquarters and what's now evolved into the national chapter program. And then was wooed back over to the agency side, worked at a small agency that specialized in political fundraising and arts and culture fundraising. And so I developed a passion for working with regional museums, large and small. And a position came up in 2013 at Smithsonian, where they needed somebody who had arts and culture membership experience paired with affiliate fundraising experience. So a weird hybrid experience and skill set, and I had that, and I started in 2013, and it's been a great journey. Smithsonian is really interesting because we have 7 philanthropic membership programs, and we have 2 magazine memberships, all in total engaging about 2 million people a year. And so it's figuring out how to work amongst all those programs and understand the value that they bring together to the Smithsonian. It's a great opportunity. It's a unique way in building value in members because they tend to over time either give more money like we want them to do, or they give across many different membership programs. So engagement with our institution and our various museums and programs is really important to the donor.
I think about the size and scope of your universe, and it's very broad, as you mentioned, 2 million members that are in some way touched or marketed to or influenced or have a relationship annually, and all the different ways in which they can engage, right? Not just channels, but
Hmm.
programs and lines of affinity. And it it's a it's an enterprise, right? I mean, it is a full scale enterprise that you're helping manage. Just curious, before we even get into the conversation, like, just how do you manage your view of all of those entities to see a donor in a singular format?
Well, truth be told, we don't at this point. It's we're really kind of set up in a way that we all coexist without being able to share that data or collect that data. So we've made a lot of inroads with regards to philanthropy and data management. In 2012 to 2015, we brought, most of the data for membership and for donors and philanthropy together into one database. But still to this day, we don't capture visitor data. We aren't consistently in a standardized way collecting data of people going to different programs and stuff like that. So it's an opportunity, and leadership is keenly aware that that's a huge opportunity to really be able to understand how people are engaging with us across the board. And that includes also kind of from a retail perspective, how they're buying things online, what are they buying in the stores, what restaurants they're going to. It's a lot of data out there, and I think the opportunity lies in bringing that together and really starting to get that 360-degree kind of view of our constituency, of how they really truly engage with us. And I think it's untapped opportunity that will build the case for the investment in that technology, because like everything, technology costs money, and it's rapidly changing on an annual basis.
Yeah, you're amongst many peers that are wrestling with the same ideas, concepts. So as we transition our conversation, this particular season of Group Thinkers is really around the idea. It started around the idea of Gen X, and that's kind of morphed and ebbed and flowed out of the research that we helped pull together into wrestling with what it means to get younger donors. And I recall a conversation that we had ahead of a TNPA webinar just about a year ago, where you had some unique insights on younger donors and how the institution views donor demographics and uses donor demographics. I want to come back to data management, but I would love for you to speak to how you look at your donor base right now and your member base, and what you know about them from an age standpoint, and then what that alludes to in terms of getting younger donors.
Absolutely. Fact be told is that our donors are aging. Even our newly acquired donors are aging. I just looked at the data for FY 21, and they're older, and it's not surprising. We're thriving right now in the pandemic, even though we were shut down, for the most part of a year. Our acquisition went through the roof about 6 to 8 months before the pandemic. We're bringing on new members and donors at a clip we haven't seen since before the last Great Recession. But they're 10 years older, 11 years older than they were back then, and that's a worrisome trend. The one thing we know is that those donors we bring in through digital marketing, which is a very small scale at our organization, because we just approved our privacy policy about a month before the pandemic hit. They're coming in, a decade younger. They're not coming on board like at 55, 45 to 55, like they were, in the late 90s, early 2000s, but they're coming on at, 59, 60. I'll take that any day. But it's really about scaling up digital marketing and really being able to kind of transition our program to that. And so we're going through that process of going from a privacy policy that got approved, and really kind of thinking about how we voluntarily comply with CCPA from a cookie standpoint, from a notification standpoint, so that we can really scale it up and understand, what the impact is when you scale up digital acquisition. The direct mail is doing well, but it's 69, 70 years old. It takes our average member 13 years to get from a point of entry at $75 to $2,500. And our donors age out at 78. So, we're sort of, approaching a cliff, figuratively speaking, and that's frightening. And we've been approaching this for a long time. So I think leadership has finally, understands the value and the potential of engaging a national audience beyond our membership to grow our membership. It will help build our pipeline. It will help us achieve greater financial stability. But it's the digital marketing that we really need to get to. And so, we've brought on a new director of digital transformation who's really looking at our organization and thinking about, what is it going to take to, become a digital organization, and what does that mean? For Smithsonian, it's beyond digital marketing. It's, we've really done a lot with digital engagement from a programming standpoint, because we closed our museums down. We weren't able to travel anymore. We've got new audiences with that. Digitization of our collections. One of our breakthroughs during the pandemic when we closed is we created Smithsonian Anywhere, which was the first time that we basically brought all the Smithsonian together online and created a dashboard that made it easy to navigate. Because if you go to Smithsonian, it's a cacophony of 30 plus websites, and to find information, it's really hard. But how can we take that further? How can we really start to create channels? How can we really start to understand people's interests so that we can push content and online exhibitions and collections to them to better engage them? So it's exciting. I mean, I think we're trying to figure it out, and at least leadership is really paying attention to it now.
There's so many things that you mentioned there, and just to recap a couple of them, there's, in an effort to get younger, one, getting younger doesn't mean finding millennials or finding Gen Xers, right? I think that's an important truth for people to talk about. And yes, we believe strongly in the emergence of Gen X, but getting younger means getting younger, right? And so that's a part of it. Second is, a key strategy for getting younger is your digital enablement. And that starts with the work of your privacy policy.
Right.
Like that, I just don't think that that's too many times we think, oh, well, getting younger and starting in digital means we're going to rush into social media. And you forget about the foundational aspects of making sure that your house is in order. And by the way, I know, John, because we've had these conversations for a number of years, getting to the place of getting your privacy policy shored up was no small feat.
Right. I mean, it's, we were an organization that had multiple privacy policies for the commercial division, for the nonprofit division. Bringing that together, really starting to think about, how do we collectively think about a privacy policy, especially when you've got parts of the organization that are marketing or want to market into the EU and parts that don't, and creating a policy that's an even playing field for everybody, in order to be able to then allow us to really kind of move the digital aspects of our organization forward. So it's, it took a long time, and we're, now we're revising it because of CCPA and for Colorado. And so that's where voluntary compliance came in. We're technically, as nonprofits, not, we don't have to comply, but voluntary compliance makes it a lot easier for us to get contracts with the big data firms because they have a lot of responsibility. And that's actually part of it is negotiating contracts with all these big data firms, getting on the same page with our commercial division. So it is a lot of groundwork to get it in place, and then once we can get there, then it's really starting to think about, well, what makes sense and how do we start doing this? We've dabbled for years, but we've never actually kind of gotten to a point where we actually start testing and start understanding the impact of that scalability. Direct mail, we've been doing it for 50 years. We understand what scale is. We understand the impact of the deeper you go, the lower the response is. Online, it's I think it's exciting. I mean, it's the unknown, and it's a little bit of the Wild West. And in some ways, I feel like we're benefiting from not having been able to taste the elixir of the free, the free to do what you want to do with digital marketing, because we were so cautious. Now we can go in and be responsible. And that's our thing, is we have a fiduciary responsibility to our constituents to protect their data. And as you know, in the past, year and a half, there has been a large data incident that affected a lot of donors across the nonprofit sector. And so I think that's also further complicated it, because we have to really think about, how our partners are protecting our constituent data.
So John, I mean, you talk about, data management and digital tools and getting kind of that side of the house in order. The other side, I'm curious about is kind of the creative and messaging and how do you reach and connect with donors. In our research, in our Gen X study, we asked donors, a whole lot of questions, and one of the questions was kind of about their, the top reason, why do you give to nonprofits? And we found that, belief in the cause is clearly their number one reason. That goes across all generations, no questions there. But then one of the areas we saw a really interesting gap was that 82% of millennials and 74% of younger Gen Xers said they wanted to increase an organization's reach or influence, and compared that to like the older Gen X, where 44% and then 23% of the baby boomers said that. Then kind of on the flip side of that, 75% of baby boomers and 65% of older Gen Xers said they wanted to make a financial impact, compared to 39% of younger Gen Xers and only 2% of millennials. So like you have this younger group that's interested in, they grew up with social media and they're interested in influence and reach and clout and that sort of stuff. And then you have this older group that wants to make a financial difference in funding. As you start thinking about how you're going to reach these donors, does that come into play? Like, does the Smithsonian need to move from being less of an institution and into being more of a cultural movement, for example?
I absolutely think so. So it's interesting. That's been within my department, the Friends of the Smithsonian. That's been a major debate since the day I started there, because we've got the group who believes that we are the Smithsonian and we should be the biggest and the best and have the best events and stuff like that. And that's our older donors. Those are those people who are over I say 65. And they want a really nice reception, and they want to be able to see other people, and then there's the other side. As people get younger, it's they don't want thankfulness and gratitude. They want access to curators and to researchers. But then it gets even deeper than that, because it's about what we do and who we are. And we've been, from my point of view, for 20 years, very conservative in how we present ourselves. And we're the Smithsonian, we're like this Ministry of Culture, and we've got these great museums and we're doing this great work, but we don't really talk about the environmental work that we do. We're one of the largest environmental organizations. We partner with government agencies and states and other nonprofits. And then, with our new secretary, who has grown up at the Smithsonian, he is really kind of recruiting a leadership team that can really leverage what's going on in the world right now. So it's climate change, it's social justice, You know, we have all these different environmental research programs and a natural history museum. We have all these cultural museums. We have African American history and culture. We have American Indian. We're going to be building the Latino Museum, the Women's History Museum. We have an Asian, you know, Pacific cultural program. So we are really positioned to kind of transition into what I call a movement, or what you call a movement, and that's great. You know, being part of a national discourse on, you know, race in America, and how do we together move forward with this, and as a country, and strengthen our country. You know, how do we, you know, as a cultural organization, really have an impact on climate change, and, you know, informing people, engaging people, having a dialogue about that. And so it's exciting. You know, the new leadership team really is starting to think of us as a movement, as much as being this kind of venerable institution. So I think they get that we have to speak almost two different languages for the different, you know, parts of our collective philanthropic group, and to be able to be relevant with a digitally savvy, socially conscious, and environmentally aware, you know, generations that are coming up. We need to be, you know, really kind of engaging them in a way that's meaningful. And so it's an exciting time in leadership. Again, I keep saying about leadership is really aware, but they're aware, they're engaged, and they are really kind of engaging people across the organization to really think this through, to come up with roadmaps of how do we do this, what's it going to take, how do you all work together? Because that's the other part, is a big bureaucratic organization. We aren't the best at working together in a collaborative way. We say we are, but as you know, any kind of large institution, you have your fiefdoms and you have your control and your ownership. But how do you kind of, you know, take that away and really think, if we work together as a group, we can really elevate our mission in a way that we've never done before, and we can attract a more diverse, engaged audience and staff, you know, at the same time, and really kind of be an example for the rest of the cultural and environmental sector.
There's a lot of what you shared there, John, that to me is about evolving the relevance of the organization. The organization is relevant, and it continues to stay relevant, but it's through really smart strategic moves that it continues to increase, as Ronnie said, increase its reach or increase its relevance. So, you know, the museums and attractions and programs that you just mentioned, in addition to the media channels, I mean, heck, as an institution, you're also a media entity with
Right.
all sorts of programs, and when we were chatting pre-recording, we even talked about that. You know, there's somewhat of the vision, current reality. It's not unlike Disney as a corporate model, that there's the parks and the media and, you know, the retail and all of that wrapped in together into one large entity. And I think that that's so powerful in terms of your strategic footprint. And as you said, as people have become more digitally savvy, and all ages have become more digitally savvy, especially in the last 2 years.
Yep.
That you have to find ways to make yourself even more relevant, to connect with those folks through the means in which they're connecting with others. So my question for you is, so, and little, I don't know, little side stream is, we know in the nonprofit market landscape, folks don't all have this figured out, right? That's not the point of the conversation, is for someone to boast in, well, yeah, we've been testing this for years, and this is what, you know, we're all on a different part of the journey to get there and to understand this. And so you've hinted at this leadership aspect, and leadership affirming the need to make these moves or to put in place something. I would love for you to share what that something looks like whether or not someone's in a large bureaucratic organization or in, a community-based organization that's 6 people. What does it look like right now for you and your teams to unpack the vision and build the strategy to move this sort of effort forward?
So I think the way it's working in our organization is, leadership sees that there are these key challenges. Whether it's something like, what does Smithsonian look like post-pandemic? What's the future of membership? What is digital engagement? And so I think our leadership team is they're going across the organization and they're kind of posing these questions to groups of people, and we create these work groups. We kind of start to identify what the opportunities are. And the interesting thing is it's not about tactical. We know all the tactical things we need to do. It's really about blue sky thinking. So start with the blue sky. Think about, if you had every resource in the world, what do you want to do? And then, working with this group to kind of figure out what makes sense in this blue sky. My blue sky idea is, what if we brought all member services and customer service together into one place? And you create a great back-end experience, for members and visitors and whatnot. That's huge. I mean, that just blows your mind. But it's something that if we were able to, implement that, it would have huge impact for the organization. And so then the question is, in the long term, how do we get to that point? What is needed to get to that point? How do you create like a Hilton Honors type, experience, from a loyalty perspective? What does that look like? What is it going to cost? What's it going to take systems wise? And so when you start to look at a lot of this stuff, what you start to understand is that in every challenge, there's commonalities that are aligned. And again, one of it's technology, 2 of it is data governance, and so, we're building the case for the investment in that. The other part of it is culture change. We have to change our culture internally to be able to move these things forward, because if you've ever been in any other nonprofit before, one of the biggest challenges is whether you're engaging a consultant or you're doing an internal project. You create, back in the 2000s and the 90s, you created these binders of recommendations, and you could go to multiple consultants over the years, and they'd make the same recommendations, and it's great, but they filled a bookcase and you never implemented it. And so the difference now is think big, then size it to what's what we can bite off in a short term and in a long term, and then create the roadmap. And so all of this is going to go up to our board of regents. They're going to approve it. Leadership's going to approve it. Then they're going to start to figure out, how do we fund these things? What are the critical things we need to fund to move it forward? So again, if you're a small scale organization, what are your core opportunities? How does it align to your mission? How is it going to either move your mission along or help you raise more money? If you're a food bank, how is it going to help you serve more in the community? So I think it's something that any organization can tackle. I think that you have to have a framework around it. The biggest challenge, and this is the worry that any person has in whether it's a corporation or a nonprofit, is you make the recommendations, you get them to leadership, and it's the challenge is getting the rubber to hit the road and to make it move forward. So I've been around the block many times, and I've seen a lot of these things happen. And this is the first time that I actually feel that the leadership team is really truly committed to moving some of this forward. And the realism in it is that we're not going to be able to do everything that we want to do. But if we can just do 2 or 3 of these things and do it well, again, that then can hopefully help us raise more money, get more funding to do things. It can create a track record where there's success, and it's paired with trust, because within any organization you have this history on everybody's shoulders that weighs them down, and that's why culture doesn't change, is because you just don't trust other people or you don't trust leadership. And so I think again, if you can get a plan in place that you can get some level of commitment to move it forward, I think then that becomes, exciting for the organization and transformative, because that's what it's about. It's about transformation of an organization. It's about transformation of a mission. And I think the pandemic has, for a lot of organizations, made them step back and kind of rethink their business models and face some really hard realities. Because we shut down, we are hemorrhaging, millions of dollars because when we were shut down, stores and restaurants were closed. And so, how do we offset that? It's by engaging people in our mission and in our, hopefully movement to change the world.
There's I do believe, I agree with you, the reality is that over the course of the last year and a half, that many nonprofit leaders have stepped back and been able to reflect and set a course. I don't know if it is day job or night job, but set a course forward towards transformation, right? And so that is definitely one thing that the last 18, 19 months have blessed us with, is the opportunity to be reflective and to chart the next course forward. The other thing that it's done, and this is where it's definitely stretched us. You have one foot in the vision side, and then you have this other foot in the good gosh, what do we have to deal with now side, like the immediacy and urgency that we've experienced of responding to. And just as we land our conversation today, I'm curious about what is keeping you up at night right now with respect to, your year-end fundraising, as you think about the next 6 to 12 months. There's part of it that is the enablement of that vision, which let's call that night job, but then there's also day job. And so just curious, John, your perspective, your outlook, what you're thinking about the current environment and what fundraising is going to look like in the next 2 quarters.
Well, our fiscal year ends in 7 days, so I am up all night long thinking about money right now. The biggest concerns I have are kind of the direct mail side of things. The cost of paper, the cost of transportation, the cost of employees now because of this changing workforce and the fact that mail shops are competing with Walmart to hire people, postage going up. Those are the things that are really kind of worrying me. The USPS, their deliverability, not deliverability, but the first class mail coming back is always at this trickle now, and we're seeing these tail ends of campaigns that are going out 2 months further. So it's the direct mail side of things really has me up at night. The cost of the program has me up at night. We've had these 2 great years where we're up significantly in revenue, 3 to 5% each year, and the expenses are just sucking the net out of the program. And so the hope of the digital shift is exciting, because hopefully we can tap into new audiences. We can increase our revenue in a way that outpaces the cost of the program. So those are the really big things. But across a lot of the sectors of the nonprofit industry, acquisition has been really strong. And it's counterintuitive. Who would have known, in March 2020, when everything shut down, that by summer of 2020 the nonprofits would be just going through the roof, and it's sustained. So it's not like they're disaster donors. That's the other thing that it doesn't keep me up, but I contemplate constantly, is who are these people and why suddenly do we have more new donors than we've had in 20 years? And that's the part I want to understand is who are they? Are they going to stick around? Are they going to build value? They're clearly not for us younger, but they're coming to us because something that we're doing. I used to think I was just a brilliant, strategist, and it was just all about the copy and the package and the testing and whatnot. But it's ultimately, I think part of it is that the world seems scarier and less hopeful than any time in our lifetimes. We aren't a generation that went through a depression or a world war, those things. but climate change, social justice, police reform, all these things, the polarization of our population, those things, and I know that millennials in the younger Gen Xers, those are things that give them angst. And so I think connection to a nonprofit mission or a nonprofit movement gives you hope in the future. And that ties back to sort of a difference between most nonprofit donors and what we have in the cultural space, and we call it WIFM, the what's in it for me. In the cultural space, there's a lot of that, and it's not about making sure that the cultural institution is there for the world in the future. It's really about making sure that an institution you believe in is there for your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. So I think that legacy building, whether it's by adopting a cultural movement or by adopting a cultural institution, I still think that both of them, it's about making sure that it's there for future generations that are related to you, and it gives you hope, and that's, I think, what we're all looking for right now, is a little bit of hope in this world.
Yeah, it's very well said. One of the things that we observed in our research was that pretty consistent the rise of the internet is an expansion of a global worldview, and the larger your view of the world, the more complicated purpose becomes, and there are changing motivations, and so we've all expanded our worldview in the last 2 years. Whether or not you wanted to or anticipated doing it in early March 2020, it's happened, and so I do think that for some, what we've seen is a call to local impact, and so the increase in the number of donors across food banks and animal welfare causes that are local is through the roof, and it's because people are trying to give where they can see it most. But it doesn't mean that other organizations aren't seeing the same increases in new donors. So there is this, on one side, it's like philanthropy is through the roof, and on the other side, it's like, yeah, but scariness is also through the roof. And so there's an interesting connection that you hit on there. Well, John, we so appreciate your time and your perspective. We love hearing about what the Smithsonian Institution is doing in terms of its organizational strategy and how that rolls into a transformed mission. And honestly, we can't wait to see what happens next.
I'm excited too. So, maybe we'll give you an update in a year.
Yeah, we'll take you up on that. John, thanks so much for joining the show today, and we look forward to catching up.
Thank you.